This is chapter 5, verse 8, and its English translation is, O you who believe, be upright for Allah, bearers of witness with justice, and let not hatred of a people incite you not to act equitably. Be just, that is nearer to observance of duty, and keep your duty to Allah. Surely Allah is aware of what you do. The next verse I want to recite is chapter 47, verse 4. So when you meet them in battle, those who believe, those who disbelieve, smite the necks. Then when you have overcome them, make them prisoners, and afterwards set them free as a favor or for ransom till the war lays down its burden. That he shall do so. And if Allah please, he would certainly exact retribution from them, but that he may try some of you by means of others. And those who are slain in the way of Allah, he will never allow their deeds to perish. We were looking at the concept of just war. And there are, as I said to you, three aspects: cause, conduct, conclusion. The three C's. What was the cause? Was the cause just for which the war took place? And how was it conducted? And how was it concluded? What happened to the prisoners of war and so on? So the first verse that I recited deals with how to fight, how to do anything. And it's a general statement that says that let not the hatred of others make you do the wrong thing and depart from doing justice. And that applies to fighting as much as it applies to anything else. The Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to those who commanded parts of his army, fight in the cause of Allah, fight those who deny Allah, do not be embittered against them, do not be treacherous, do not mutilate dead bodies, do not kill children or those people in convents. And you can see from this that those who were religious people were protected by this. And after one battle, as the Holy Prophet Muhammad surveyed the battlefield, he came across a woman who was lying there dead, and the Holy Prophet was very angry. And he said, why was she killed? She did not fight. So that's a general statement that non-competents in a fight are not to be harmed. You might say, well, I'm generalizing from a particular incident, but let us see what Hazrat Abu Bakr Razillah Ta'ala said when he sent out his armies shortly after the passing away of the Holy Prophet Muhammad. He sent Hazrat Osama to Syria, and there is another instruction in this for us. Osama was a young man, and the Holy Prophet appointed him the Amir and the commander of that army. And despite his young age, Muslims, those who were elderly, those who had greater personality and authority in Medina, they were told that they had to obey him. He is your Amir. And Hazrat Abu Bakr said to him, on sending him to Syria, he said, do not betray or be treacherous or vindictive. So when the battle is over, do not take out your anger on those who were fighting and others. Do not mutilate. Do not kill the children, the aged or women. Do not cut or burn down palm trees or fruitful trees. Do not slay a sheep, a cow, or a camel except to feed yourselves. And you will come across people who confine themselves to worship in hermitages. Leave them alone to what they devoted themselves for. He didn't say Muslims have won, march into mandirs, march into monasteries, march into churches, force those people to embrace Islam, and if they don't, then burn down their places of worship. Listen to his words. Leave them alone to what they have devoted themselves for. So, if a Hindu is worshipping an idol and you go there, you leave him alone. It is for God to punish him and not for you and me. Again, Hazrat Abu Bakr said to Yazid ibn Abi Sufyan when he sent him out to fight, he said, I give you 10 commandments. Don't kill a woman. Don't kill a child. Don't kill an old person. Do not cut down trees. Do not destroy homes. Do not slay sheep except for food. Do not burn down palm trees or drown them. And do not be spiteful or unjust to the people that you are fighting. What wonderful instructions these are. These days, it's only been recently that we've come across what are called rules for war or law of war. And we saw that those British soldiers, or that British soldier who was sent to prison for killing Taliban. And if you heard what he said, you could see how vengeful and hateful and spiteful he was being. This is an instruction to Muslims as well. Don't be spiteful or unjust. But if we look at the First World War, and I want to read some statistics to you. 14,287 merchant sailors were lost at sea. They weren't fighting in the war. They were simply bringing food from various places to their home countries. Worldwide casualties. Civilian kills through military action, 1 million. Civilians killed through starvation, 6 million. Military personnel killed, 9.8 million. And those wounded, 20 million. Well, military personnel, you can say that they went out to fight, but 1 million civilians were killed as a direct result of military action by both parties, by Britain and France and Germany and her allies. And interestingly, those of you who are interested in Blackadder, here a statistic that I first learnt of in one of those episodes. 11 minutes in 1970, that was the life expectancy of a British pilot in the army. Now, when you have millions of civilians dying as a result of military action, how can that be just? When homes are being destroyed, when crops are being destroyed, you can see how many people died of starvation and illness. Why? Because fields and crops were being destroyed, because homes were being destroyed, because factories were being destroyed. And we saw this on a larger scale in the Second World War, which is not the topic here. So it cannot be right that you have a war in which innocent people are killed in such numbers. In fact, if we wind back to something, perhaps I should have said at the beginning, even the military personnel who died, they didn't go out to fight voluntarily. A lot of them were kidnapped and taken to army bases, forcibly enrolled and sent out to fight. This was the normal practice here. How can it be a just war when, the first Housing Act came out shortly after the First World War. And why was that? The reason was that whereas these people were out of the country fighting for the king and the country, what was happening at home? They had rented their homes, one covenant of the tenancy agreement to keep the home in good repair. The women and children who were left behind could not carry out those repairs. So what were the landlords doing? Throwing them out for breach of contract, repossessing homes and renting them out at a higher rent or selling them off for a nice profit. This is how these people were being treated by their own country, let alone the enemy, the people that they were fighting. And there are many examples that whereas Lloyd George called it a land fit for heroes to come back to, what they came back to was a terrible situation where people who were prepared to lay down their lives for their king and country came back to die of starvation and illness. Another thing to be considered is medical services. Are they to be available to everyone? And again, Islam is the first religion that made it compulsory for Muslims to provide medical services to the enemy. And I don't have to give you more examples than to point you to the great example of Salahuddin, who sent his own personal physician when he heard Richard the Lionheart was ill to treat Richard the Lionheart. And such was the reputation of the Muslims in those days that Richard said he trusted Salahuddin Ayyubi more, who was his enemy. He trusted him more than he trusted his own allies. And I wonder if the same thing is being said by Muslims about Muslims these days. And of course, one important aspect is how do you treat the prisoners of war? And the Holy Quran says, fight in the cause of Allah, fight those who deny Allah, but don't be embittered, do not be treacherous, and so on. And in another place, the Holy Quran says, therefore when you meet the unbelievers, sorry, I recited the wrong verse there. Therefore, when you meet the unbelievers, smite at their necks, and when you have thoroughly subdued them, bind and tie them up firmly, and then let them go either out of kindness or for a ransom. until war lays down its burden. So you can see that the prisoners, contrary to what many people believe, that Islamic wars were to fight and enslave people, the Quran specifically says if you fight someone, then either let them go out of kindness or at most by accepting ransom. And we know that the Holy Prophet's own example at the time of Battle of Badr, when he gave strict instructions for prisoners to be treated kindly, to be given to eat what those who were keeping them captive, what they were eating. The Holy Prophet said, you are recommended to treat your captives kindly. And as I said, what was the ransom that was taken from these people at Badr? Those who didn't have any money, what was the ransom? They were told to teach a Muslim to read and write, and they'll be free. It wasn't necessarily money. At one point, some companions did take some people as slaves, but when they saw the Prophet's example, they released them and let them go free. The Prophet urged Muslims to show good treatment to war captives. He said, treat the prisoners of war kindly, relating how the companions complied strictly with his orders given by the Prophet. One of the prisoners of Badr says, I was with one of Ansari families after being taken as a captive. Whenever they had lunch or dinner, they used to give me preference by providing me with bread, while they'd eat only dates, in showing compliance with the Holy Prophet's treatment of prisoners. The point is that bread is made of wheat and so on, which is not available in Saudi Arabia, where dates are plentiful. So what would be regarded as luxurious food was given to the prisoner, and the person keeping that prisoner would just eat ordinary food, which was dates, which were available in plenty in Arabia, and so on and so forth. This goes on and on. And all prisoners were treated equally. There is that famous example of the time after battle that the Holy Prophet came into the mosque of Medina, Masjid al-Nabawi as it's known now, and people said, O Prophet of Allah, you're looking tired. And he said, yes, I could not sleep properly last night, because whoever has been given my uncle to entrust has perhaps bound him too tightly, and I could hear him all night in pain. He didn't say, loosen the rope. He just mentioned that, and that person went home, and not wanting to cause the Holy Prophet Muhammad distress, he loosened the knots. The next night, when the Holy Prophet, or next morning when the Holy Prophet came for morning prayers, he asked about his uncle and said, I didn't hear him last night. What happened? And he was told what happened. And what were his words? Have you done the same thing to every captive that you're entrusted with? He made everyone go and look to see that no one was tied more harshly, more strongly than his uncle. And this was what made Islam great. And this is what set down the wheels in motion, which took 1400 years to complete and set up the rules of war under which war is conducted now. And of course, lastly, we have the treaty which, against the Holy Prophet's injunctions of being kind to people who fight you, not be spiteful to them, such a treaty was rammed down the throats of the defeated armies and countries that it led to the Second World War and a greater catastrophe. So although we honor those who laid down their lives, we have to say that if we look at the First World War, its cause was not just, because it was not to fight for the freedom of conscience and belief and propagation of any school of thought or belief or religion. Its conduct was not just, in that millions of civilians were deliberately killed solely because they were taking food to their own civilian populations. And many other, 1 million civilians were killed. And millions more died because of destruction of property and land and crops and fields and homes. And conclusion, the treatment of prisoners and the way Germany was treated was unjust and un-Islamic. So, World War I, despite the great sacrifices made by everyone, and remember, there were people from what is now India and Pakistan and Bangladesh who came to unknown lands to fight for the British Empire, and they laid down their lives. But we have to say, despite their sacrifices, it was not just a war. It was not a just war. It failed the 3C test for cause, conduct, and conclusion.